Welcome to the Menopause Mindset Podcast, the place to get some answers and feel supported along this often bumpy journey. Many people sail through menopause, but many people don't. And so my guests and I are here to motivate you and inspire you so that you can make menopause a happier transition for yourself and for your loved ones. I'm Sally Garozzo and I'm an award-winning rapid transformational therapist, a menopause educator and the founder of the Sleep Superpower Academy. So without further ado, let's dive in. So my guest today is a mum of four, a veteran C-suite executive, a leadership coach and a menopause educator. She founded the Meno Collective membership after she quit her corporate career to improve her health after struggling with burnout and the early onset of menopause at age 44. After realizing there was a total lack of awareness on the many impacts of menopause at work, she decided to do something to change that. To date, she has coached thousands of people to perform at their peak, minus the burnout. So Melissa Macgowan, welcome to the podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me, Sally. Yeah, great to be here.
Oh, you're very welcome. So I don't know much about you and I would love to get to know you a little bit more. So can you please tell us about your menopausal journey? Because you had an early menopause. It started around 44. Was that a shock to you or were you expecting it?
No, I definitely wasn't expecting it in that, there wasn't any, history of that in my family, for example. And clearly the doctors weren't expecting it either because it literally took, 8 to 9 doctors. I saw 9 different doctors over a period of about 4 years to try and get some clarity about what was going on. And, now, as probably you and I both know, I got bounced around just like many women do. It's thyroid or it's low iron or it's, I was told it's not menopause, and having hormone blood tests and now I laugh because I understand that those things are really not necessarily always, accurate kind of indications. So there was a lot going on, like you said in the intro, I already had a big busy life and a corporate career and traveling and all of that. And I was the main breadwinner in my family. So there was quite a bit of pressure going on. I was used to operating at a level of, big meetings, big teams, frantic schedule, like full schedule all the time. And then suddenly, but, not overnight, but sort of like a creeper, like burnout, just started having all of that going on, plus things like acne, memory loss of confidence, anxiety for the first time, hot flushes. But hot flushes came late in the piece for me. And it wasn't until I started experiencing some of those, more kind of common sort of symptoms of menopause that I finally went back to the doctor and got clarity that that's what was going on. And, so for me, clearly it was just all too much at that time. And it really triggered, some of my unconscious bias around what does it mean? Like, I'll never forget when the doctor said to me, "I'm sorry to tell you," and that's what she said, "I'm sorry to tell you that you're in menopause." And I was due the next day to run a leadership conference. And I was just sitting there and I was like, I was crying because my brain went straight to, well, what does that mean? Age. I went straight to age. Like, I'm not old enough for that. Does that mean, I'm old and I'm on the shelf now? And what does that mean? I've still got kind of young kids and I'm in the big job at the peak of my career and all of that sort of stuff. So I couldn't even hear her. She was talking about HRT and, I couldn't even hear because I had all that going on. And that really led to me looking and reevaluating and saying, oh, what am I going to do here? Because the physiology then was just really burnout was what was going on for me. And I was the only female on the executive, in the company I was in. So, it kind of got to the point where I just felt like I needed to do something. Like, it really wasn't working. I had so many things going on with my health because I'd been unknowingly in perimenopause for, a number of years. And so I was kind of out on a long walk with my husband. And I just kind of stopped, and I kind of, sort of crumbled and broke down really, and said to him, hey, I just feel like I've only got two options here. And again, breadwinner, 4 kids, no backup plan at that stage. I was like, I'm going to like quit my job or kind of fight on. And so it was this binary decision of like, quit a job and a career that I've worked really hard for, and that I've achieved a lot in, but to quit really for the sake of my health and my sanity and my family, or I kind of fight on and then keep dealing with the increased symptoms, the stress, and what that was going to do for my health. So I guess that that's really my story, is that I felt like I didn't have a third option back then.
Mm-hmm.
So I did quit my job, and all those doctors I'd spoken to, none of them had really kind of helped me with answers or solutions, and I tried lots of different things, and it just seemed like no one had a great kind of answer for me. So that led to me to really delve into this area and, I guess roll on 5 years. And, now I am coaching and supporting other women who are going through perimenopause and menopause at work and at home. And that's why I founded the business you just mentioned, Meno Collective, because I just really want it to be different for other women. And I know we might talk about it, but, here in Australia, like at least 1 in 10 women are leaving their job, often at the peak of their career, due to, the health effects, mental, physical, emotional of perimenopause and menopause. And I recently read in the UK that 1 million women have left their job, in some way due to the symptoms of menopause as well. So all of that kind of, really spurred a passion in me to kind of look at my background and see what I could do to change this for other women.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And I think so many women who are listening to this will probably relate to you, because a lot of them are in the workplace as well. I wonder, there's so many questions that have popped up for me. I've been scribbling down. How did the actual symptoms affect your day-to-day work and your ability to like hold meetings, stand up and give presentations, get projects done on time? How did it?
Yeah, tick, tick, tick.
Mm,
Um, a few things. I'd been through some challenging things already in my life. I lost a baby, a late stage pregnancy. There were some things that I'd gone through that were challenging, but I'd never been someone who had, suffered from anxiety. And I just felt, and of course I didn't know, and as we know, a lot of women don't, so they kind of blame themselves. I just felt like this sort of self-doubt start to creep into my day-to-day life. And my way of dealing with that was to kind of push myself harder and sort of say, come on, Melissa. And it came up in different ways. I mean, that I literally rang my husband one day and said, I do not know what's going on. I think I'm actually losing it, because, I'm in the executive team. People are looking at me. I'm like in the middle of discussing something, and I just kind of losing my words. And I heard someone else refer to that recently as word holes. But as we know, right, perimenopause impacts our cognition, our energy to the brain and the function. I had no idea about any of that. I didn't even know what perimenopause was back then. And so I'm sort of feeling it in how I'm communicating. I had the kind of anxiety coming in. I had like pimples and acne. I had vertigo. I literally was on the front. I was presenting to a huge group, and the room literally started moving. And this happened a couple of times. There were 2 that were terrible. That was one of them. I had to stop the presentation and go and lie down somewhere in the kind of lobby area of this hotel with someone from my team. And I didn't know what was causing that. I didn't know that was linked to hormone changes. Like I was in H&M once in New York, super busy store, and there it went, like this vertigo. So these some of the symptoms that you don't hear as much about, like hair loss. I had so much hair loss, and I had the hairdresser saying, it's fine. Like I'm like, no, it's really not fine. And then hot flushes were really challenging for me at one point as well. And again, I was working with a lot of senior men, and I would sort of turn on I'd grab the remote control for the air conditioner, and there'd often be a bit of a like, what is she doing? Or even like having a bit of a joke and whatever. And I just would be mopping my brow. And so I was embarrassed. Like, I used to wear dresses a bit, or like silk tops, and I had to stop wearing them because I'm sweating through my clothes, and then trying to be, capable and competent. And so this feeling of like, hot flushes, and then realizing, well, you can still be a competent person and, sweat behind your knees. But all of that was going on. I was awake a lot at night. So I went through periods of both sort of insomnia, but also night sweats, really bad night sweats. And they were waking me up, obviously. And then I was like drenched. And when I say obviously, I mean, I actually didn't really realize at the time that's why I was waking up. But then I would like have to change my clothes and even the bed sheet sometimes. So there was kind of a mix of a whole range of things going on. And then I would get through the week and then fall to bits on the weekend. And, my kids and stuff would be like, why is mum crying again? And, Stuart, my husband, would take the kids out on a Saturday morning because I just was not coping. So then I'd feel guilty about it. And then I have to pull myself together again on Monday and, get back into work mode. So I think, as you know, and I guess, many of your listeners might resonate, is it's a creeper. And these hormone changes, a lot of women sort of don't necessarily identify or want to identify with being menopausal. But, we know that, in your 40s, you're very likely to be experiencing the impacts of like perimenopause. And they start to impact you in different ways. And it takes a while to connect the dots and know what's going on for you, and then what you can do about it. And that's why I'm so, passionate about helping women connect those dots, because if they don't, they often feel like it's their fault. Then they put more pressure on themselves. Well, that's what I'm speaking from experience. That increases our stress. And then we've just got this downwards cycle of, worse hot flushes and worse anxiety and, genitourinary stuff going on. I had all that happening as well. And so you're tolerating things for too long because you don't know what's going on. And so really, I kind of had the whole kit and caboodle. Yeah,
everything. And it just makes me think of this whole thing of the fear making it worse as well. So you're on the front of the stage and you're thinking, oh my God, I'm spinning out, I'm dizzy, I've got to go and lie down. So you're dealing with the humiliation of that, the shame of that, the embarrassment of that, and also the fear of what the hell is wrong with me? There's something wrong with me. Is it a brain tumor? Is it cancer? What the hell is it? I think this not knowing really disempowers us and compounds the problem so much more when we're just in that unknown world. If we know it's menopause, we can sort of soothe ourselves a little bit and we can say, oh, okay, I know it's not the worst case scenario. I know it's just menopause. But for you as well, you had that thing of, oh my God, it's menopause. I don't know what menopause means. Like, is this the end of the road? Is this the end of my life? Because nobody's really telling you that you can live with menopause and be, it reminds me of that old body form advert where you can still go rollerblading with your period. You can still go rollerblading with your menopause. You can do all of those things. You can still climb, you can still exercise. It's not the end of the road, but I guess there's like, we have to challenge ourselves, don't we? We have to go into training mode again. We have to make our bodies adapt, and we're going to get to that. But I just want to ask you, did you experience any discrimination when you were at work and you were having all of these problems?
It's interesting because of what you just said, which is absolutely my experience, that sense of loss of control, of like, my body's not playing fair. What the hell is going on here? And to be honest, feelings of shame, which, as we know, is like deep, heavy stuff, right?
Yeah.
So with all of that going on, even though I was in a key leadership position to, start this conversation in the company, I was not doing that, right? So I'd already been discriminated against once before in relation to pregnancy. So I knew what that was like. And also I was deep in the struggle. And there's nothing worse than, looking to our women leaders and expecting them to start and change a narrative when they are deep in the struggle. And I often think about the women who have gone before us in companies, right? There was no conversation. That it was so taboo, it was such a stigma, and they just kind of had to endure and get on with it. So that's probably kind of just intuitively, that's what I did. Now I did end up speaking to my manager, who was male, and letting him know some of the things that I needed, which there was a bit of time. I had to kind of look at my identity and understand where I was at before I was able to kind of have that conversation. But I did. And that was very helpful because, there were it wasn't like saying, feel sorry for me. It wasn't saying, treat me differently. It wasn't saying like, I don't want to have a career anymore, but it was just kind of saying, hey, I need a bit of consideration because of the way this is impacting me, and that will help me take the pressure off me if I can kind of have this conversation. And it will also, in the way of, I guess I'm just thinking, it's like, you don't have to have a back injury to have empathy with someone who has a back injury. I didn't expect him to understand it, although many of these men have wives that, that are or have experienced menopause. So it was just things like, I'm not getting up at 4 a.m. to get on a plane at 6 a.m. Like, I just can't do that. Or I'm not going to come to that dinner. Or, there was just a few things like that. Or, I need to kind of eat here, or I need more water, more access to water, that kind of stuff. So that was helpful. The data, though, is very clear that over 80% of women are not comfortable disclosing their menopause status at work. And I totally understand why. One of the reasons is, I guess it's awkward and, how's this going to go? Or it's personal, right down to I'm fear that I'm going to be perceived differently and in fact treated differently and in fact discriminated against. And you're in the UK. I think I read there's been like a 33% increase in cases going through the tribunal over there about that menopause related discrimination cases. So this is real, and as relation to age and gender, to sexuality, like it is happening and it is coming, and at the same time, I guess menopause is coming out. So we're able to start to have some of these conversations and help workplaces understand, like, why would we even talk about this? Because actually it makes great business sense. You've worked hard to build a culture, attract and develop female leaders. You want to retain them because look at all that you've put into them, and the last thing you do is want them to leave at the top of their game or just struggle in silence and then be impacted in terms of productivity or going off on extended sick leave or whatever that is. So there's a lot of work to be done. But I think that conversation is certainly in the UK, I'm obviously in Australia, we're pretty far behind here, I would say. But it's starting in the UK, and I think it's well underway in the UK. And that is heartening to see. And I think it helps us get our heads around just the facts and the messages around, hey, this is hormonal change. It impacts, like most women. I mean, everyone goes through it, but 80% will kind of really experience those symptoms. And for like a quarter of women, that'll be really debilitating. Yeah. And here's what that looks like, and here's why it affects work and life. Yeah. Men are kind of interested in that conversation. Yeah.
I think most men want to help, but I think it's the unconscious bias that exists, like it does with race and sexuality and size. Yes. and ability. It does exist. And I think what came to my mind was we need like Gay Pride have their march and their protest. Yeah. And that sort of celebration. Almost feels like menopausal women need to have their own kind of pride march. But I don't know if menopausal women have got enough energy to have their own pride march, to be honest. But something along those lines.
I mean, you mentioned it before, like, hey, I snowboard and I'm a post-menopausal woman. I mean, I'll talk about myself, but there is also some positive shifts that happen, isn't there? And post-menopause doesn't mean, you're out of the woods per se, right? I'm 4 years, kind of over 4 years since I've had a period, but I'm still dealing with the symptoms of menopause, and certainly, you're adapting your lifestyle to sort of adjust to that. But there are some really positive things that come out of that as well, I think, for women, and finding, their voice and harnessing some of those biological changes around the circuitry of our brains that have us a little less focused on everyone else and a little more focused on ourselves. And so I see that in the workplace, where I see women not holding back as much now and saying, hey, this is what I think.
Yeah.
So there's some real power
We
in a
live in
positive way that comes with that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. We are living in a more woke time, and you can't get away with discrimination like you could do before because it wasn't on anyone's radar. And I think we have the internet and open conversations to thank for that. But I do think you're right. I think our perception of menopause needs to change. And if everyone can change their perception of menopause, then it won't be such a taboo subject. If we can normalize it, and we can only normalize it if we talk about it, which is why I do this podcast, which is why you go out into the workplace and educate people. That's why we do what we do.
Yeah, we're partway through it. I run a program as well, just for women who are in it, and we've got some doctors and other experts that help with that. But the point is just the continual feeling of like, I'm being heard, and this is a safe space for me to ask. I mean, I was in a coaching session last week with a group of women, and it literally went from 1 minute talking about Zoom backdrops to the next minute, right, we're getting straight into this, and we're talking about, vaginas and all sorts of stuff. And it was so, in that safe space, what can happen? But I'm also seeing a lot of women who don't want to identify with this topic, because I think that unconscious bias around menopause, it's almost like it needs a rebrand, doesn't it? Because, my peers are 49, 50, and they're saying, oh no, that's not for me yet. Like, whereas I love seeing women who are either, in it or coming into it, or just want to be aware and prepared and not so scared. But I'm seeing a lot of women my age who I think they're scared, and they've got that perception of it. So they just kind of want to keep it away. And I just want to put a big warm blanket around them and say, hey, it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, it's probably going to impact your experience of it,
Yeah. Yeah, the more you know, the less likely the symptoms will impact you mentally, physically, and emotionally, I think. Anyway, there's no point in staying in denial. I mean, I do know people, therapists as well, who don't want to talk about menopause, don't want to, but I think it plays into this like growth culture, this like sort of almost like the culture of denial. If we just deny it exists, like bypass it, and just
Mm.
keep focusing on the grit and the like the growth and the determination and that sort of being on your A game all of the time. If we just focus on that, then then menopause will just come and go, and we won't even realize that it's had an effect on us. But I think there's a real danger to that. I think if you ignore menopause, your body will scream at you louder and louder and louder until something happens and a breakdown occurs eventually. So it's just better to get it out in the open as quickly as you can, and find a group, find people that you can talk to about it so that you normalize it.
I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. Because, you mentioned that sort of push on mentality.
Yeah.
That's kind of what got me into burnout, and in a great model that I love around the 12 stages of burnout, the compulsion to push oneself is, the first step. And many achievement orientated women who are working in business, whatever that is, they tick that box, but then it's a slippery slope down to kind of neglecting your own needs, and, then experiencing some real health issues. So, yeah, denial is obviously not good, but equally, I just had a woman yesterday say, the only thing my mum told me about menopause was a very frightening thing around her breast cancer and HRT. So that's all I've had in my mind. So I guess, again, not blaming that generation, but we didn't have those conversations. So what messages have we absorbed, or where have they come from?
Yeah.
There's a lot of good stuff going on now, but it's just new territory, really.
Yeah, it's dismantling the past, isn't it? It's dismantling the shame around it and the fear around, especially taking HRT. But something that you said was interesting, the 12 steps of burnout. Do you know what they are off the top of your head?
I don't have that in front of me, but it's this is my menopausal brain kicking in. I think it's called Freudenberg and North are the two psychologists that it's a model from the 1970s, and I think it's as relevant today as it was then, because it goes through those sort of 12 stages, and I can't recall them all, but it starts with that, compulsion to push yourself, and then sort of slowly, like, prioritizing others, neglecting your own needs, feeling a bit disconnected, and then it ends right down in that more chronic manifestation of almost hopelessness and exhaustion and despair, and that's where we're seeing physical and mental health issues associated with burnout. So it's not to say we shouldn't be identifying with any of those stages, but it is helpful to have a look at that and just see, okay, where am I at here? And there's no time like midlife. There's no better time, I don't think, to really just have a bit of a good hard look in the mirror and get some support to say, what might I do differently? How to reevaluate things here. And I truly believe that the foundation of the work we do is taking action on whether it's a lifestyle lever, whether it's HRT, other medication, exercise, stress management, taking an action is is the greatest form of self-compassion, and it's going to show up in better health outcomes for you, and then hopefully more career choice and options as well.
There is a real link, isn't there, between menopause symptom severity and burnout. I know for me, that's been, especially when the insomnia kicks in. For me, when the insomnia kicked in, that was it. It was like the end stage of burnout was coming, because your body just is always existing in that fight flight mode. You're in that sympathetic, because that's the only thing that can get you through. That's the only source of fuel that you have, is cortisol and adrenaline. And of course, that has an effect on your immune system, on your ability to think rationally and calmly. You're overreacting to stress all of the time, and just an inability to do things like go to the supermarket and buy vegetables. That's what you need to do to help yourself feel better, is to nourish yourself. But the idea of going to the supermarket and, like, first of all, knowing what you're going to buy, knowing what you're going to make, having to carry it home with you, and then take it out of the bag and put it in the fridge and then start creating something, can feel so overwhelming if you're living in that fight flight mode all of the time. And so I suppose my question is, how did you come back? Like, let's talk about you. It's really relevant.
I actually came up with a term, and I still use it today, but I called it Meno-whelm, because literally that feeling of overwhelm just became so sort of persistent. And I think what it was for me was that mix of, it was sort of like that evil interplay of a whole range of those symptoms, especially when you throw in the sleep. So all of that's going on, that physiology of burnout, at the same time as that exhausting kind of pursuit for some solutions and help. And you're just kind of like on top of everything else in work and life and all the hats that we're wearing. So that really was kind of a state of overwhelm for me. And, you mentioned fuel. What did I do? I was like, sugar, coffee, grabbing all the bad stuff. Not that it's not good and bad, but just grabbing the things that we know lead to, increased cortisol, and suddenly my jeans aren't fitting and all of that kind of stuff. So it was a definite downward cycle. I dug back into my undergraduate, was in physical education and applied science. I became my own expert. I was always open to, like, all sorts of therapy. So I tried lots of different things. I did find things like, acupuncture helpful. I tried loads of different products because I used to travel for work. I'd go to the US or the UK and I'd come back with a whole bag of different products and things to try. But at the end of the day, my key learning was that knowledge, you mentioned it already, knowledge was truly empowering. And so that's what I did. And exercise has always been in my lifestyle. And there were times there where I sort of fell off that. And that was a true sign to me. For others, it might be that they're big readers and they've stopped reading books. Or, for me, it was like, or, your hobby, your passions are gone. Like, where's the joy? So I sort of stopped exercising. And so that getting back into exercise was really important for me. And, stress management, like whatever works as part of your stress management. And I also kind of, looked at what communities am I part of? Like, where am I getting support from? Because I do think that, I was coaching other people, but like, who's helping me? So, just what a force that can be and how powerful it can be when you're connected with other women who are, experiencing similar challenges and, supporting each other and hopefully finding some solutions themselves. So that, they were a whole range of things. My husband was really, really supportive and empathetic. Yet we were talking about it recently, and he's learned a lot more about menopause over the years now. And he said, I do look back, and he said, I think I just thought you could probably just keep going and get through it. Like, he's like, I think, I felt sorry for you and I was whatever. And I said, but I think I thought you were going to be able to kind of push through it. And he said, I also understood why, you weren't feeling like you wanted to have sex. But he's like, I did take it a bit personally, and I did, didn't really understand it like I do now. So, there's a lot we're all still learning about this, and I'm still learning. I love, learning from the women that I support too. Like, this is a menopause movement, right? It's being led globally by women like us. So, all of that keeps me going and growing.
Yeah, brilliant. And I love what you've said. Everything that you've said makes so much sense, especially about the passions, because I think if we're too imbalanced in our life and we're too work focused or even too health focused, let's
Yes.
face it, because we can become the other way. We can get too health focused and nitpicky at everything and too worried about eating the wrong thing. So I think balancing it out with some light-heartedness, some groups and some friendships is so important as well. Just being able to cut loose and make fun of life in a way. That's hugely important.
Such a good point. We love music. My
Yeah.
husband, we've got sort of, a couple of record players downstairs. And I really agree with what you're saying about the food, for example. It really, bugs me what I see on social media and around these kind of, everyone must do, I don't know, keto or, blah, blah, or even intermittent fasting, and how that actually impacts women at this stage of life, not necessarily in a positive way. So depriving ourselves or feeling like more heavy shoulds when we're already, not feeling great about ourselves. That really pisses me off when we hear about all these gurus, and preying on women at this vulnerable stage.
I think we can see right through it, can't we? You get to an age, especially in midlife, where you've been there, done it, got the t-shirt. You can sort of see right through all of these claims, and you can just see the sales process behind it. And actually, I'm a big believer that protocols in the long run work better than pills. I'm not saying don't take the pills. If I've got a headache, I will take a pill. If I can't get my heart rate to slow down, I will take a beta blocker. But I'm not reliant on those pills. I'm much more reliant on my protocols, which actually brings me to my next question. You talk about the morning routine and how your morning routine is really important. So would you like to tell us what you do for your morning routine, and has it changed or has it always been the same?
Yeah, I probably first established it as it is in some format now. I mix it around a bit, but when I was in this kind of perimenopause struggle, and I was starting to connect dots, but I still hadn't kind of got the clarity, is when I really kind of implemented a bit of a flexible but morning routine for me, which was essentially around how to not shortchange myself on just getting a little pocket of spaciousness, as well as some exercise somewhere in the day. So that feeling of waking up in, survival mode and the cortisol going, that fight or flight, when you've been asleep for like hardly any time, that was happening to me a lot. And then, it was very easy to grab for the, phone and the email or a coffee or whatever. So I started getting up a little bit earlier. I know it's sort of counterintuitive when you're not necessarily feeling full of beans, but it did energize me over time. So yeah, for me, look, I do meditate. I try and do it every day. It's not about being good at it. That comes up a lot of resistance from women, like, sitting still and finding stillness, whatever that works for you. My husband said to me, "It's probably going to be the hardest thing you'll ever do." And, it's not far wrong, but I did a transcendental meditation course probably about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago now, 5 years ago. So I try and incorporate that into my morning. I always have a cup of tea. I may do a bit of journaling or whatever. And then I'm a big fan of breath work. So breath work, Kundalini yoga, and I'll do like 20 minutes, right? So I'm not doing like a 90-minute yoga class. I've used an app called Yoga Glow for years. I love it. There's a woman on there called Kia Miller. I love her stuff. I think it's been incredibly supportive for me around hot flushes and stress management and just energy. So that's some of the stuff I do. And then, it just depends what's happening. I might be with the kids and getting them ready for school, but I try and exercise every day. And so that'll either be like a jog, a brisk walk, or, some strength stuff, a bit of a circuit or some weights. I might get out in the driveway and, move my body. I have these exercises that I've sort of adapted for myself over the years to move my energy. And I do like an exercise for 3 minutes, and I do another one, and it just really works well for me to get me out of my head, which I still find is an ongoing challenge, and back into my body. So that's kind of the focus. So there's some of the things I do.
I love that. I love this idea of moving the energy, because I think we can get very, very stagnated, and the stagnation often happens in the head. We get cut off from the rest of the body. So by getting up and just, even if it's just like swinging your arms or stretching or just having a little jog on the spot or putting some music on, just get that energy moving. If you can, like, step outside, get some fresh air. The breath work, I couldn't agree more. I just use a Wim Hof breath work YouTube video. It's 10 minutes and it sets me up. It gets me out of the sympathetic and into the parasympathetic. And then you can think clearly, can't you? You can make much
Totally.
better decisions for yourself.
And I think what you and I are both kind of hitting on, which is that for any women listening who are those kind of high achieving women, who are hard on themselves, they often hear that and think 10 minutes, like, is that enough? And surely it needs to be harder than that to kind of do something for my health, like going for a 10-minute walk in the afternoon, surely, like, yeah. And that's that resistance where we just need to get out of our own way and actually recognize those little things really do make and I wish I'd gotten onto that earlier, I guess is what I'm saying. I wish I didn't think that I had to like go for the gold star in something. I didn't have to run a marathon when I was actually depleting my system so severely, right? When I could do a 10-minute HIIT class. So yeah, I think that's just a kind of a challenge to the high achieving women out there. A little bit often really does equal a lot over time.
Yeah, I read that in your bio or somewhere. I read that a little bit often equals a lot over time. And I've been with my personal trainer now for nearly 3 years in October. And that's consistent weekly exercise with her, plus the little bits that I do in between. And, over the 3 years, I've noticed that I have become so much stronger, so much fitter. just through, 10-minute hit classes, or 10-minute or 20 minutes probably is the maximum I will do on my own. I don't usually exercise for longer than 20 minutes on my own. If I'm with other people, then I will exercise for longer. But those bite-sized forms of exercise are fantastic. And it just makes me think about wondering where this sort of 1 hour, hour and a half idea of exercise comes from, and it makes me think about the 80s and 90s when that's what you should do. You need to go to the gym, but we had time
Like when
back
we didn't
then.
eat healthy fats, or because they were bad for us, and we were eating all the sugar and sugar
Right,
free and all this different stuff.
sugar-free low fat diet,
Yeah.
um sorry, high sugar low fat diet. But yeah, I think we had more time though, didn't we, back then. We weren't as, I've got the word adminified, as in doing all of this admin that we have to do, life admin today, that didn't exist back in the 80s and 90s and even the early noughties. We did have more time to have more leisure, really. And it's a shame that our leisure time is restricted into those 10-20 minute bite-sized chunks, but equally it's good to know that we can get some results just by doing short bursts of exercise, and then perhaps spending longer on your back relaxing in a field, or just chilling on the beach, or laying on your bed. I think we mustn't underestimate the power of rest as well.
Oh, totally. I think that just recovery, moving and active recovery, but then that
Yeah.
more passive recovery. And that's an ongoing, sort of challenge for me as well. Like getting the out of the head thing. I think it always will be.
Mm.
One of the frames that I've put on that over the years is starting to see it more in the lens of, like when you talked about 3 years with your trainer, like how you feel now
Yeah.
as a result of what you're doing, probably stronger mentally and emotionally, and maybe it's good for your confidence and whatever. So, just starting to think about that feeling. And if we truly want to feel relaxed, and then
Mm.
we look at our schedule for the weekend and it's jam-packed with stuff for the kids and social stuff and whatever, then we're not honoring what we actually, our how we're living is not honoring how we want to feel. And the contrast that many of us experienced in the lockdowns were, there was a little bit more spaciousness, not to discount all the challenges that came with that, but it provided some contrast, and so then we can ask ourselves now, like, how are we feeling about where we are spending our energy and time?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I want to move forward a little bit in the conversation. You have 4 children. I don't have any children. I have a dog, and I find that stressful enough. But I'm in my mind, I'm thinking, how do you run a household of 4? Like successfully, when you're going through all of these challenges? How does it work?
Well, you mean like when I was in kind of my deep menopause struggle, or just now, or in
Just
general?
now, I think, like, yeah, let's talk about sort of now, and how you make it effective, how you make it work for you, and not overwhelming and chaotic. I mean, it might be overwhelming and chaotic.
I've got to be honest, it's not successful, right? Yeah. So there's overwhelm, there's chaos, there's a constant readjustment of who needs what and how can we do it.
Mm,
Look, there's also some boundaries. Yeah, like I'm in here now in my office, it's nighttime here, my kids are around, they know, right? The door's shut, mum's working, they're probably not going to like come screaming into this office. Stuart and I have always worked as a team. Now that's challenged through menopause. It obviously impacts relationships and families. And so we're coming out of that, but now our kids are getting older and they've got different needs.
mm,
Something we try and do, and we know when we don't do it, because we haven't been, every week recently, but we try and do something that we used to call, and it's such a sort of ridiculous name, but we used to call it our marriage meeting, which is we just catch up at the start of a week and just kind of look at what's on, because there's so much going on, like with logistics and whatever. Then when we start the meeting with a bit of appreciation. We try and to say, hey, I appreciate you, making me that cup of tea every morning. I appreciate that when, so-and-so had a total meltdown, you handled that this morning and I was able to, do my podcast or whatever. So we start with that. Then we kind of talk about logistics and, then we go through some of the different hats that we wear, how we're looking after ourselves this week. Let's plan for some fun because how's that going to happen? Do we want to catch up with some friends or go and do something like that? Yeah. And the big insight that we've had this year, and, we might talk about it's like financials and we might talk about if something's pissing us off or whatever. So communication, right? And then when we get really busy and we don't do it, then we drop the balls. Yeah, inevitably we drop the balls. I mean, we drop the balls anyway, but we just try not to drop the glass ones. But we come back. But what we've really found this year is we need more support. Yeah, so we know that the family life is changing, right? It still takes a village, but we often don't have our villages anymore in terms of where our families live and aging parents and all that sort of stuff. Yes. So, that's something that we're looking at the moment. All right, how can we get some support? Because we can spend 8 hours literally probably a week doing the washing for the kids and us because there's 6 of us and sports and all of that. Yeah. Or we can try and find someone to come in and help us do that so we can focus on looking after ourselves, being with our kids and working on our business. Yeah. So it's a constant feast. I don't have the perfect answers. I think that, communication and, making sure you get your own exercise time and, a bit of a walk on your own, listen to your favorite podcast. He plays his records. I nerd out of my reading or whatever that is. Like if those basic needs are not, it's the classic oxygen mask to the self thing. Yeah. Yeah. But it's not easy. I'll be lying if I said it was.
Yeah, no, that's good. I really, really appreciate your honesty. And I'm always in awe of big families that tend to make it work. And I think partly that's why I never had children, was because I didn't know on a very subconscious level how it would all fit in, how it would all work. And I guess it's just one of those things is that when it comes along, you just make it work, like you figure it out. Necessity is the mother of invention. And I love that you have a really good support system with your husband and it's like a team effort, like you will get everyone involved as well. And then outsourcing, it's so important to outsource the load, because I don't think, I even struggle with like 3 loads of washing a week. And it's like, oh God, it's got to be done. It's got to be hung up. It's all this stuff, cleaning the kitchen after every meal and stuff. It's
totally.
Like, when that's not in your zone of genius, it's outside your zone of genius, you sort of resent it and you just want to exist in your zone of genius where you can be thriving and you can feel like you're making a valuable contribution. And that's where you earn your money, isn't it? When you're
that's so logical, and I'm so pleased to hear that you kind of experience that as well. But I don't know if you see this, but I also feel as women, we're not great at receiving. Yes. So receiving support. And so whether we're talking about outsourcing the washing or getting some other domestic support or caring support or whatever that is, or, investing in, I don't know, whatever that is for your career. It could be like, the sort of stuff I do, like, when you do, supporting women through menopause, like investing in yourself to actually, protect your health and your career. Yeah. Like we're not good at receiving the support. So
yeah, it is hard.
That's a call to all of us, is to really look at where am I not receiving? Yeah. Where am I resisting?
Yeah, it is tricky. And I think it can go back generationally as well, where we sort of carry that mother wound, that female burden. And there's, I experience it myself, even though logically I know that it's okay to ask for help. There is that sort of feeling of I need to take it on. And it's like this backpack that you wear. You're always the one that is getting up early, thinking about everything, because it's almost like you don't trust anyone else to do it. But I think if you back off a little bit and allow them space to think for themselves, whether that's partner or children, then they might rise to the occasion. So for me, it's been about backing off and trusting and having a conversation, meeting my own needs so that I'm a nicer person to be around. And then my husband wants to support me, or we wants to like come to the table and figure out how it's going to work, rather than just being irked by my bad mood or whatever. So yeah, I think that's good. So let's wrap things up, Melissa. Let's talk a little bit about work and leadership culture, just briefly before we finish.
Mm.
How do you think, in your professional opinion, how can workplace culture become more menopause friendly?
I think in its simplest terms is just to purely grow awareness
Mm.
about some of the things that we've been discussing today.
Yeah.
To understand how menopause impacts women, how that shows up for them in their in their work and in their life, and why that leads to so many women either wanting to or leaving their jobs,
Mm.
and the whole discrimination piece and all that kind of stuff, because a big chunk of the workforce is 45 to 54 year old, that kind of age bracket of women. So I think it starts with having a conversation, with growing awareness, and then from that place kind of thinking, well, what's right for us in our organisation to maybe now take it a step further and put some support in place.
Yeah.
I don't think that needs to be like a one size fits all. A lot of organisations in the UK are putting in menopause policies, and there can be leave and different benefits and stuff, and it's great to have things in writing and that sort of visible support, but it doesn't have to be that way. There are little things you can do in the environment. There was a woman recently, for example, on one of my webinars, and she said, I just went straight, she was in a position of influence. She said, I went straight back to work. I didn't ask anyone's opinion, and we put free sanitary products in the bathrooms for the women, because I suggested that on the webinar. So just things like that. You can have, workplace champions. You can create community and structure around that. But I think information, like we said, information and having those managers of people just have enough of awareness, because performance management can be really tricky if you don't have that understanding, and then you're considering, whether some adjustments maybe need to be, made for women. And the result, as we know, is that, that can get like costly, and legal stuff, and, replacing talent is also costly.
Yeah.
So I think it's a big opportunity, and, we call it being menopause friendly, but really it's just understanding the business case around this, and understanding the facts around this, so that you can be kind of, I guess, a supportive workplace, but also compliance, because let's face it, money talks, and businesses, if they understand that this is going to help them manage risk and impact their bottom line, then yeah, it's not just in their culture and inclusion, it's also a commercial thing.
Yeah. And that's what's really going to make the difference, isn't it? Because people at the end of the day make the profit. Yeah, people make the products, people make the systems. It's people power. And if the people don't have any inner power, then they can't make any profit. So it does have to be thought of very differently. And I've loved everything that you've said. I think I'm going to call this podcast Becoming Menopause Friendly.
Great.
'Cause I
You and
love
I are converts already.
it. Yeah. So I would love for you to tell our listeners what the Meno Collective is. What do you do inside the Meno Collective? How can people join? How can they find out about it?
Yeah, so there's really two focus areas that we've got in the business. We help workplaces, like we've just discussed. We kind of partner with them to just provide them with some education and resources, so that they can really get those benefits we just talked about, some of those cultural and kind of commercial benefits in their workplace, not just for their women, but for everyone in their workplace, for their men as well. We also have an 8-week program that specifically supports professional women reduce their menopause symptoms. So we've got a community around that, and we really help them survive, because to be honest, there is survival at first, isn't there? And then thrive in their career and their personal life. And that's doing a lot of the things we discussed, helping them, empowering them to, become kind of their own expert like I did as well. And I think that's one of the best ways women can really help themselves at this stage of their life. So if anyone is interested in connecting, I mentioned hot flushes before. That was one of the things that really impacted me and my confidence and everything when I was working and deep in that. I have a resource that I put together based on my experience and what helps women in our community to just provide some relief, and it actually picks up on some of the things we've talked about here today that sound like they work for you as well. So that's kind of a hot flush relief toolkit. Mm-hmm. And your listeners can just get that at www.freemeno.guide.com.
Lovely. That's brilliant. And so grab that, because that sounds like a brilliant resource. And if they want to, in fact, I'll put all of your links in the show notes anyway. So if they want to come and find you on social media, you can just click onto those links and it will take you directly there. But what's your website?
It's www.menocollective.com.
Brilliant. That's what it says on the tin. I love that.
I was just hoping that my, brain fog hasn't kicked in here at the end of the day and that I'll remember what I'm actually talking about.
Oh, well, thank you so much for spending that hour with us. I know it's late in Australia. So, have a wonderful night's sleep. And thank you so much for...
Oh, thanks for having me. And I love that these conversations are global as well. Menopause is going global.
Yeah, love it. Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks, Sally.
Remember, if you're liking these podcasts and you really believe in getting the word out there about menopause, midlife and mental health, then please subscribe and leave a review. It just means that we get to reach out to more people who need to hear this message. And happy people means a happy world. Your interaction might very well help to save another person's sanity. Please share this and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.